In today's show, two very rare Consul Capris, and, like father, like son, a duo whose standard of restoration won prizes from the get-go. Here's the son, Paul Beckett, and here's the father, John. Both have spent many years, in Paul's case most of his life, restoring and loving this little-known early 60s rarity from Ford of Britain. Designed in the 50s but not launched until 1961, it was possibly a case of too little too late for Ford, who never really got behind it after the runaway success of the Anglia and the launch of the game-changing Cortina halfway through its life cycle. But the Consul Capri certainly had its admirers, including one 14-year-old schoolboy whose life would never be the same again after seeing one. John Beckett takes up the story.
Initially, it all started with my son, who came home one day from the baths. He was 14 at the time, and he said he'd seen this car.
And on the way there, I always used to pass this particular car. Never knew what it was, but I was just intrigued with it. And it never sort of left my mind. And then I happened to say to my dad one time when we were looking at cars in a car book, I said, I really like these, I've always liked these, I've never known what they were.
And we referenced this car, and it happened to be a car that a chap that I worked with at the time actually owned one.
And he told me that his friend at work actually owned one. Although he no longer drove it, but he did own one. And he believed that he'd still got it, and I was really surprised, and I really wanted to go and see this car, which my dad arranged for me to go and see, and that's how it all started really, and that's where I found out that it was Consul Capri, and that's where it's all started from really.
And we went out to lease it, which is about 3 miles down the road from here, and this car was still there, and it belonged to a guy named Cyril Edward, who'd owned it for 23 years, and the car hadn't moved for 12 years. And when we opened the garage door, it was covered in dirt, concrete. A brick had dropped out of the garage wall and dented the rear wing. But of course, he was 14 years old at the time, and he fell in love with it. And he said to Cyril, if you ever think of selling the car, let me know.
Left it at that, and then it wasn't long after, only about 6 months after I think, might not have even been that long, he contacted my dad and said, if your lad wants that car, tell him he can come and shift it, like, but you know, he can come pick it up and it's yours, like, and that's how it started. And I had to have it. I just had to have it. My mum wasn't best pleased because she thought, 14 buying a car, it wasn't really the done thing, but I was having it, and that was it. When I bought that, I didn't know anything about them at all. I knew nothing about them, only that I liked them, and that was it. And obviously, I knew nothing about it. I had to get somebody else to have a look at it with me, a grown-up and more experienced person to have a look at it with me. And it had been standing, and it was pretty rough. It wanted bodywork doing to it. It wanted a sill on it and wheel arches, and the engine was seized, the brakes were shot on it. So it wanted all the usual stuff, But I was determined to see it through, and I did see it through with the help of people and the backing of my dad, like. And yeah, I got there in the end, and then one led to another. I think over the last 20 years, it's 7 or 8, I think, we've restored. Most of them have been Capris. There's been one classic, which I still own. I've still got that car, and some I've restored and sold on to other enthusiasts, but I've still got 3 of them here.
You could say it's not like father like son, it's like son like father. He's owned one for all this time, and it's rubbed off on me, and I now own 2 or 3 of the models.
So that's the story of 2 men's passions, or should it be obsessions? And later we'll see in detail a couple of the cars they've lavished their attentions on.
Just enjoying the view.
A beautiful and rare Capri GT, and a real one-off. A Capri converted by Rolls-Royce and Bentley coach builders Hooper of London. Too expensive, too small, or just too out of touch with the swinging 60s? Sadly, the Ford Consul Capri never really sold in appreciable quantities. Paul Beckett takes up the story.
Well, the Ford Consul Capri was developed in the late 50s alongside its sister car, the Consul Classic, and really it was a sporty spin-off of that car. It was developed in the late 50s, 56, 57, 58 by Colin Neal, but it didn't reach production until 1961 due to the success of the Anglia, which was being produced at the time, and they hadn't got the capacity to produce the Capri until 61. That's how it came into being, but it was a short-lived car really, because by the time it went into production, the Cortina was already being developed, and that came out shortly after this was launched, which really was a cheaper car and just as capable car, and really that put the kibosh on this really. The Capri really was only designed as a 2+2, so it was already aiming for a limited market, whereas a Classic was aimed at families. So there was a limited market for the Capri as it was, and it was an expensive car for what you were getting really, a two-seater really, and the two seats in the back really were only suitable for children or luggage really. So it was an expensive machine really, and it was too expensive for what it was, I think, really. Well, it was made here, but it was sold in it was sold across Europe and North America, as well as places like New Zealand and South Africa. It was sold in all those countries, but obviously in very limited numbers because they only made roughly 19,000 Capris over a 4-year period. So it was really limited in its sales and its success, really. They tried to make the car quicker and more appealing by introducing the GT Capri, but again, that was it was more expensive than the standard Capri, and there was a better performance with it, but as you say, you could get a Cortina GT, which was probably a quicker car, lighter car, and then of course if you wanted a really quick car, you could have the Lotus Cortina.
So enough of the background story, let's see the cars. Here's John Beckett.
The two Ford Capris that we've been looking at today, notably the Monaco red one, is one of only 2002 made by Fords, and it's a GT model. This particular model has only done 34,000 miles, and it was located in the Lake District.
I was at a show with the club on the club stand at Tatton Park near Manchester, and most of the other people on the club stand, I think we had about 6 cars on the club stand, most of the other people on this club stand were walking around the auto jumble, and I was the only one left on the club stand. And this old gent came up to me and said, "Are you with the club?" And I said, "Yes, I am, yeah." He said, "I've got one of these." He says, "A red GT." He says, I don't use it, it's stuck in the garage, would you be interested?" And of course my eyes sort of widened and said, "Yes, definitely would be interested." And I had his phone number and his contact details, and I arranged to go and see it. And I went and saw it at Ulverston in Cumbria, and it turned out to be largely original condition with low mileage, although he didn't really use it very much, and he was neglecting it actually in a way, because he got other interests, other classic cars, and I think he'd bought it on a bit of a whim really, because he'd always liked them in his youth. But he'd never really done a lot of miles in it. He'd owned it about 12 years and only done about 800 miles in it. So when I saw it, he pulled it out of the garage, and I saw it. It was covered in dust and everything, but you could see below all that what what a good car it was, and I made him an offer on it, and he accepted it, and I bought it back the following weekend. And then, when I got it back here, I found out a bit more about it, because people in the club who've been in the club a lot longer than me, people who've been in it from the start really, in the mid-70s, had known about this car.
It spent 17 years of its life at a franchise in Harrogate in Yorkshire, purely as a demonstration model to be kept within the showroom. Hence, it's an original car in its original condition, and it's probably quite rare to find one like that.
And in 1979 they sold it into private ownership, and at that time it had got 2,000 miles on the clock. Well, the car now is largely original. It has had paint in places by previous owners, and I've painted it in one or two areas as well to maintain it really, as rather than restore it. It's not a restored vehicle. The interior is all completely original in it, including the carpets, the seats and the door cards. The engine is original, the mileage is original, it's got full history from day one. It drives extremely well. It drives as a 34,000 mile car should drive really, as you would expect it to drive. It's nice and tight on the road, it's responsive, the brakes are good, and it's all round a very good car,
Although this Consul Capri GT is in original unrestored condition, Paul's hiding his light under a bushel, bearing in mind the amount of work he's obviously done to get it into the condition you see today. But then again, the amount of time and elbow grease is all relative when you see his latest restoration project. Here's proud father and owner John Beckett to explain all about this unique Capri.
The Hooper model you can see behind me is one of only 40 made. This one being number 25 of that 40. We believe that there's probably 6 or 7 survive. 2 or 3 of those actually only survive because they are Hoopers. They really are basket cases in a sense. Paul has restored this particular car over the last 3 years, and it's a very nice motor car.
But this is the only vehicle on the road in the world, as far as we know, unless some little old lady's driving one round Cornwall somewhere that nobody's seen.
Hoopers primarily were interior coach builders, i.e. as I said, the seats in this particular car are out of a Rolls-Royce Phantom 5, and the dashboard is probably walnut, again from an offcut from a conversion on a Rolls-Royce. So primarily they were very high-class coach builders for Rolls-Royce, Bentley and that type of motor car. When you purchase your Capri from 1961 onwards, and you wanted a particular Hooper Capri, you initially bought your Capri and then you submitted it to Hooper for them to Hooperize it, if you like, and there was a list of options that ran from probably about £500 to £1,000. It included 12 coats of paint, you could have electric windows, all leather interior. They're actually Phantom 5 seats cut down by Hooper for this particular car. The dashboard was completely ripped out and replaced with a wooden dashboard. Double clocks, as you can see on the back of the car, the lights are altered by Hooper. They removed the 2 by Ford and replaced them with the 3. They never removed the engine in the 60s because it would invalidate the guarantee. That's why this particular car is finished in a maroon, but the engine bay is still sage green. The original colour of the car, I believe it was sage green when it left Ford's. It cost £801. It was sage green, as I say, but it had a white roof. And when you remove certain trim on this car, i.e. the carpets, the sage green floor pan is still there. This particular conversion by Hooper, you could say, I suppose, it was a middle of the range conversion. It actually cost £683. So when you consider the price of the car was £801, to then go and give another £683 was a fair chunk of money. As I say, you could run up to £1,000 with this particular conversion by Hooper. Your car was 801. You're in £1,800 of investment, if you like, in a motor car. For £200 more, the E-Type Jaguar was coming on stream in 1961, and it was about £2,100. So you take your choice, a Hooper Capri or an E-Type Jaguar. This Hooper Capri we had known about for quite some time. It was owned by another father and son team, if you like, who lived in Stourport-on-Severn. Mick Pace and Lee Pace owned this particular car. Mick has been into these cars for quite a number of years, and he's got a treasure trove of parts down there, which he keeps in a large shed. This particular car was in the shed, but there was that many parts in the shed, you couldn't see the car at all. And I'd been down quite on a number of occasions, and I just happened to say to him, if you ever get the Hooper out, Mick, because I'd never seen a Hooper, if you ever get the Hooper out, Mick, I'd like to come down and have a look at it, just to familiarise myself with it. So he duly rang me after a few weeks, and he said, if you want to come down, I've managed to get the car out and it's standing in our yard now, and it'll be there over the weekend. So Paul and I hot-footed it down to Stourport-on-Severn, and we spent an afternoon with him, and we looked at the car. It wasn't the best Hooper in the world, by any means. The paint was very dry. As I say, these cars had 12 coats of paint, and you can imagine what 50 years had done to 12 coats of paint. It was very brittle. You'd only got to rub your hand on the roof and the paint was off on your hand. No engine in it, no, although Mick had got the original engine and it's in the car now. No bonnet on it. When Paul removed the rear valance, where we thought it had been filled and somebody had put some filling in it, it was actually a mouse's nest that had nested in the rear valance. So all in all, it wasn't a brilliant car, but it was a Hooper. And I left Mick with the saying, like I think everybody's used it sometime or other, if you ever think of getting rid of it, let me know. So a couple of months went by and he duly let me know that they were thinking of selling it, and there was a few people that he wanted to have the car, and Paul and I were on the list, so we duly bought it, and that was in October 2007.
This car has been fully restored. It was basically a good original car because it is low mileage. It's only done 36,000 miles, but it has had to have work. It's had a rear valance on it which was rusted away. Both front corners were rusted away. They've had to be done. Side light pods have been renewed on it. It's had a wing on it, a new wing on it. It's been completely stripped down to bare metal, and obviously repainted and primed and acid etch and all the rest of it. And it's been completely restored. The interior is largely original. The seats and everything are original, although they have been reconalised by a specialist in leather. The carpets are the original carpets. The dashboard's all original. All the clocks are original in it. Everything's really original in it. It's just been rejuvenated and brought back to life. There's a lot of hard work involved in it. Yeah, I've spent roughly 4 years on this car, obviously in my spare time, at weekends and after work at night in the summer, and most of it's been done in this driveway and in this garage here. So I'm not a professional restorer by any means, and I've had to do it the hard way. I've made some mistakes along the way, as you do, but I've gone back and corrected them, and I've taken my time over it. I've done everything right. I've researched it and looked at others I've asked people who've known about these cars, you know, what's right, what's wrong, and I've gone from there. And I've done everything to the best of my ability, and this is the finished result.
What can I say about my own son? He's brilliant. He's meticulous. He's if he does something, he does it properly. It's no good. He won't walk away and say, "Oh, it'll do." It's got to be right, and I think it's all reflected in the car you see behind me. He's been brilliant. He's been, as I say, with doing it from 14 years old, he knows the anatomy of the car very well. So he knows all the places to look. In fact, he gets people ringing him up now that value his opinion. They're going to see a car, they'll want Paul to go with them to look at a specific car because he knows where to look. So he's worked enormously hard on it. And I can honestly say that I have restored Capris, but this particular car, I have never laid a spanner on it. I cannot take any credit for it at all, other than I've kept him watered and fed with hobnobs and cups of coffee when his spirits were low.
I won a few prizes with this car, yeah. We won, on its first time out, we took it to Tatton Park, which is near Manchester, about 30 miles away from here. Big show. We took it there. There was 2,000 cars on the field, and it won Car of the Show there, which I was knocked out about, really. I was really surprised at that. That was on its first trip out. And then it's done a couple of local shows, and it's gone down really well there. And then it went to the big Ford show at Gaydon, and it won Car of the Show there early this year, which again I was really surprised with and really pleased with, you know. Because you don't always appreciate your own car, do you, you know. Yeah, other people are impressed with the standard of the work. They are, and you know, and I've done the best I can, and you know, it's nice when other enthusiasts say they can see what you've done, and you know, they can tell that you've done a good job on it, a proper job on it, you know. I haven't skimped it anywhere, it's been done properly.
To own a motor car that right at this moment in time, so different people tell me, is the only Hooper Capri on the road in the world, it feels a responsibility, it feels a privilege to own a motor car like this, and to see people's reaction to it is wonderful. It really is. It's a joy to see people's reaction when they look at a car like that, and normally the reaction is, wow, where can I get one? You've only got to say to yourself, well, I'll just pop out and put £5 worth of petrol in, thinking to yourself that you'll be at the forecourt for 3 minutes. You're not, you're there an hour, because there's always somebody who comes to you and says, my dad had one of them, or they had the classic, do you mind if I have a look? Where did you get it from? Sometimes they finish up with, where can I get one from? Because they want one. They see it and the reaction is, wow, I want one. So that tells you everything you need to know, really, about the Ford Capri.
One of only 40 converted, and quite probably the only one on the road anywhere in the world today, self-effacing Paul's restoration is beautiful and deservedly has won him many prizes, and no doubt is destined to win many more. Hard work, time, dedication, knowledge, and more than a little skill are all necessary requisites of an expert car restorer, along with enough money to do what needs doing. So Paul, how much have you spent restoring this Hooper Capri?
We worked this out, we've sat and worked this out, as you do when you do these things, and without buying it, we think we calculated just shy of £6,000 to do it. That's not including buying it. So yeah, we spent about £6,000 on it, but that's not including my time, which has taken me 4 years of, you know, weekends and nights and all the rest of it, you know, me work holidays and stuff. I've spent entire weeks on it at times. So, but you can't put a price on that, really, can you?
2 immaculate Consul Capris, one rare, one simply irreplaceable. Both cherished and looked after by a couple of the UK's leading authorities on the mark. Between them, John and Paul Beckett know more than a thing or two about the Capri range. So, if the Capri was made today, do you think it would sell?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Because I don't think currently in the range they've got a car like this, have they? I suppose the last car they made like this would probably be the Cougar or the Probe was along them lines, which again was not a successful car. I think a car like this today would, I think there'd be a marketplace for it, although Ford really don't seem interested in that sort of market, do they?
I think if it was based on the lines that you see behind me, with a nice drivetrain, i.e. a 2000 engine, a 5 or a 6-speed gearbox, with all the things that this car has got on it, like the rear windows that you can fold up, I think they'd have a winner on their hands, and I think people would take to it a lot. Maybe that's what Ford should do. Maybe they should do that.
Stylish motoring for two, and a couple of occasional kids in the back. That's what Ford of Britain promised in the 1960s, but in retrospect it was a concept before its time. Now, coupes like the Audi TT and the Peugeot RCZ attract thousands of buyers, and Ford concentrate on the mainstream. That's progress. So Paul, you were 14 when you started on classic cars. Would you recommend other kids of around that age to get involved?
If youngsters have got an interest in them and they've got genuine interest in them, then they should pursue it. Why not? I mean, the classic car movement actually needs younger people in it now. A lot of people are getting older, and well, they are. And you know, I do think younger people actually do need to come into the scene. And I think if they see a car that brings back memories, or they like just the look of it, as I did with these, then they should pursue it. If they've got interest in doing it, they should follow it. Yeah, definitely. It's a good thing to get into.
John and Paul Beckett love their Capris, and it shows. The Consul Capri range from Ford of Britain never really caught the public's imagination. Unlike some contemporary British cars that sold on hairy-chested sportiness and wind-in-the-hair thrills, the Capri's promise of an extravagant country club lifestyle never really resonated with the 60s public, many of whom were buying their first car and were simply looking for something cheap and reliable. Now, in these days of focus groups and lifestyle targeting, the concept of a stylish, leisure-orientated two-door sounds like pretty sensible marketing, and many manufacturers have followed suit since the 60s. So, too soon, too niche, and too impossibly glamorous, the Capri didn't turn out to be the white heat of technology that Ford promised would get the British public excited. What a shame.